As time goes by, we're getting a better and better understanding of affinities, classes, and how that applies to the hyper mechanic, as well as synergies. It's time we apply this knowledge to some deck building. My name is Najif, and I'm a professional ranger. Like all of you, I crash landed here in Illuvium with nothing. Join me on my journey as I capture and train Illuvials as I battle my way to the top. You're watching Najif Plays Journey Through Illuvium. Most rangers will pick their favorite Illuvials, throw them on the board, and hope for the best. But the really good rangers know how to compile a deck that is both diverse and synergistic. This breakdown will prepare you for battle in the player versus player ranked arena. Alright, so this is what we're going to go through today, but we're going to start right here in the middle. First, let's look at this section down here. Out of these decks that I came up with, no one of them is better than another, not knowing what all of the Illuvials are at this point. Your goal is to make a deck that is diverse, yet synergistic. Although it hasn't been clarified, we've heard the number 30 for the amount of Illuvials in your deck. So when we're talking through this video, we're going to assume you can have up to 30 Illuvials in your deck. There's going to be a placement cost for each Illuvial, as well as weapon and armor for your ranger. So you can see that's going to be these yellow dots with numbers. And so again, when I'm talking about what we can put onto the field here, we don't know those numbers, but we can assume that you're not going to be able to throw 8 Illuvials on the board that are all super powerful and have composite affinities and classes. Another unknown we have is if you can reuse Illuvials after a match, because one match isn't always going to end the game. A lot of times you'll probably be playing 2, 3, or even more matches. So we don't know if after match 1, the Illuvials that you used on the field can or cannot be used in the next match. So when it comes to synergies, what your goal for the field is to have 3 or 4 stacks of an upgraded or a composite affinity and class, and then either 6 or 9 to meet that threshold for your base affinity and class. Your base stack synergy threshold is going to be 3, 6, and 9. Your upgraded or composite synergy threshold is going to be 2, 3, and 4 stacks. In a previous video, I showed how the matchups work and how that applies to hyper. So just quick, this is how the matchups are. You can see in here, you can have up to a +8 or as low as a -8. Now, when it comes to hyper, these numbers don't mean you're going to be hitting harder or stronger to another Illuvial. It just means that you're charging up your hyper meter faster. So if you have a +8 matchup advantage, you're going to have an 8 times faster hypermeter charge. If you have a -8 advantage or a -8 disadvantage, all that means is that your opponent is charging up their hypermeter 8 times faster than you. So back to here, finishing off our notes here. The ranger will have a weapon and armor. From this leak, we can see that the weapon will have a base affinity and a base class, and the armor will have a base class. Now, just some speculation from me, there's likely going to be a way to get another base affinity. So then you could complete this with 2 base affinities and 2 classes. So even though that's unknown right now, I think we'll figure out a way where that's possible. There's a ton of research and preparation that goes into making a video like this, so do me a huge favor and click the like button for the YouTube algorithm. It really helps a lot. So to the 5 possible decks that I think are going to be working the best are going to be your water and fire, earth and nature, fire and air, nature and water, air and earth. And we'll get into exactly what I mean by that in this top left corner, and then I'll show you all the examples. We're going to be looking at a water and fire deck here. And the goal of the water and fire deck is to have a good amount of water and fire stacks for your deck. So frost, you're going to have 4 Illuvials for frost, which is going to give you the 4 frost stacks, 4 water stacks, 4 air stacks. Wildfire, again, 4 wildfire stacks, 4 fire, 4 nature. And you work your way down so that when you're looking, you have a lot of water and fire stacks, so you have 2 real options on how you want to set up your field during a match. And you can see why it's important to have those 2 options, but not just any 2 options. If we look over here, we're talking about water and fire. If you come across a deck that has nature and air, you want to focus around the fire. If you come across the deck that has earth and fire, you want to focus around water. And I have this set up for the 5 deck types that I came up with. I'm not going to go through each one because it's basically the same concept. But again, here, earth and nature, you really want to have those stacks for earth and nature, as high as possible. Now I'll leave these each up there for a second if you wanted to take a screenshot. Here's fire and air, we have nature and water, and then we have air and earth. And another thing to consider is the ranger's weapon. I think this is pretty obvious, but if you're making an air and earth deck, you're going to want the ranger's or weapon and armor to be earth and air. Okay, so how do classes fit into this? I think the best way to go about this is to come up with your deck looking at the affinities over here. You can see in these deck types, I have a section for a choice class, which will give you 4 extra alluvials that you're adding in. Now, the reason I did that is so you can build up some of those class stacks. So for example, if you came up with a deck with all of these in it, and you added up your classes, and you came up with 5 fighter, 8 empath, 3 mystic, 3 slayer. You know, the highest stack threshold for those base affinity and classes are 9. So you might want to use these extra alluvials to get 2 more fighters and 1 more empath. So you can get these numbers to 9. And same thing with mystic and slayer. These are composite affinity and classes. Their max stack threshold is going to be 4. So again, if your deck adds up to 3 mystic and 3 slayer, then you're going to want to use those extra slots for a mystic and a slayer alluvial. So you have your deck assembled, you queue up for a match, and you see your opponent's deck. What now, you ask? Keep watching. All right, and the last thing I want to look at here is after you have your deck, what are you going to use for the field? So here I have my deck, and then across the top I have possible matchups. So your easy matchups are going to be those who make their deck and just focus on one base affinity. So basically, you come up against your opponent and you see that they mainly have water and tsunami alluvials, and then they maybe throw in a mud or a frost. Those are going to be very easy to counter. And let's just look at the example for air. So down here, they basically make their deck around air and tempest. So because you have a water and fire deck, you're going to be looking at your fire alluvials to get onto the field. And what beats air even more is nature. So you have wildfire in your deck. So right away, you're looking at getting those wildfire alluvials on the board. I think 4, if you can pull it off to get the full synergy stacks, or even 3. And then you have your steam in there. You're going to have 2 steam for your tank, which is going to give you more fire stacks. And then you're going to close it off with a couple more fire alluvials. So that says 2 there. And then your ranger is going to have, again, a fire weapon. So that's very easy to counter. Now let's look if they came up with one of these options. So water and earth will be here. Nature and air is here. And as you can see, these are affinities. They're basically touching each other. And these are going to be decks that are easy to counter. So if you come up with a deck that's nature and air, you know that that opponent has no way to counter your fire. So that's going to be easy just going with the inferno and fire composition there. And just as another example I have here, so earth and fire, within this water and fire deck, you're going to be looking towards your water affinities. So this will be a pretty easy one where you're going to want to throw in 4 tsunamis, get your 2 steam in there for a tank, add in a couple waters, and then your ranger can have water weapons. Now here are a couple examples of decks that I'm recommending. You have the water and nature, earth and air, and then we'll go through an example of fire and air. These are a lot harder to counter, which is why I think they're the best decks to choose, because no matter what your opponent has, you can counter them a little bit, but they can also counter you. And I think when you get into higher levels of gameplay, you're going to see a lot, if not mostly, deck types like this. So let's look at fire and air real quick. They have fire and air. We have a fire and water deck. So if we put our water alluvials, yes, we can counter their fire, but they'll counter us even harder with the air. If we put our fire alluvials, we'll be neutral against their fire. We'll have a slight advantage to their air. So right away, we're looking at that being a better option, but not the best option. So you want to be a little more diverse on the field here, but you also want to be able to get those synergies. So this is where I'd say have that extra tanky alluvial. So probably start with 3 steam. We can see even though our fire doesn't have a big advantage, using our fire alluvials is going to be better than using our water alluvials. So I'd say putting a couple inferno in there. And this is going to be where having those choice in class, those extra alluvials in your deck are going to be important, because you're going to want to focus a little bit more on the class side. So then you're going to be looking at how do your class Synergies match up against your opponents. So that's when you're going to, throw 1 or 2 extra alluvials in there. So I'm trying to get better and better at explaining all this. In my head, it makes a ton of sense. I'm not sure how it's going to come through on this video, but feel free to hit me up on Discord or tag me somewhere, and then we can have a little conversation about it, and hopefully I can explain this a little better for you. With Illuvium PvP being an auto battler, deck composition will be extremely important. You can have the best alluvials, but if you assemble a deck that's not diverse enough or is not synergistic enough, you're going to struggle. I plan to keep you updated with the latest information on how to prepare yourself for deck building and PvP play. This will be some important information if you want to climb the leaderboards. So make sure to join me on my journey through Illuvium. Make sure you click that subscribe button and check out this video I've highlighted here if you haven't seen it already. I highly recommend it. I'm also on Instagram, posting more content about Illuvium, Fancy Birds, Axie Infinity, and more. So go give that a follow. You can find all these links below, including my Linktree link. If you're interested in drip or just another way you can support the channel, then use my link to join my downline. Thanks again.